Hey guys, Adam Savage here. For Star Wars Skeleton Crew, Industrial Light and Magic hired my good friend John Goodson and fellow model maker Dan Patrascu to execute a working miniature of the Onyx Cinder, complete with dynamic lighting and motorized engines. I visited the miniature stage set up at Lucasfilm during production to check out the model and chat with John and Dan about just how they built the ship. A gorgeous model with no 3D printed parts whatsoever.
Dan, John, tell me what we're looking at here. This is beautiful.
It's the Ironclad. It's what we call it. It's got another fancier name.
Yeah.
The Star Wars universe, it's got a different name for it.
But your internal name is the Ironclad.
Ironclad. Yep.
Okay. And is there 3D printing going on here? Or is this all scratch built?
There's no 3D printing on this at all. It's all either handmade. There are probably about 30 kit parts on it, and the rest of it's all handmade. Wow. And it was like making a pattern for this engine, which this was designed in computer graphics. So this is the same engine, but different scales, which is easy in computer graphics. But I had to build two masters at two different scales for it, then make a mold, then make the castings, So there are parts that are cast. I mean, all this stuff's cast because I've got duplicates.
And you're doing all this in different garages. Is that correct?
Yes.
There's no model shop.
I've got a 2-car garage. He's got a 4,000. You got now a 4,000 square foot shop. John's working in his garage, so we call ourselves 3 Garage Productions.
I love 3 Garage Productions. This is what scale is this? How?
I think it's about 1/72 based on the cockpit size.
Okay.
So, but the size is determined kind of by the shot requirements and what John's model mover that he's built, what it can handle, and just what's the optimal thing for what we need. So 3 foot was this, whereas the Razor Crest was 2 feet and Moff Gideon ship was 5 feet long.
5 feet. That's long.
It was long. Yeah. I don't know how we got that one built. That was during the pandemic. I don't know how that one got done, but it did.
Even though you're working under the confines of garages, it's got to be really fun to be building big models again.
It is, but it's also kind of stressful too. Because I keep saying, I've said this to everybody. I'm like, we used to have a model shop that was like 6,000 to 10,000 square feet depending. And we had departments, and there was a mold room, and there was there were painters and electricians and machinists. We had all these different departments. Now we got us. So it's kind of.
So when you're having stuff cast, is it you doing the casting?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I go to the casting department, which is just a few feet over from the the fabrication department.
On some 1610 in the bucket. All right.
I got a fan in the wall, and there you go.
Dan, you were doing machining in this. Where is there machining necessary on the Ironclad?
All of the machining that I did is hidden because it's all the internal components that make the engines move. So there's actually a sheet of Hexel, yeah.
Oh, okay. Lightweight Hexel, like airplane flooring.
Right.
Okay.
Fiberglass and aluminum. And so everything's mounted on there. Mm-hmm. And then like for instance, the rear engines are all mounted on needle bearings. There's 2 sets of needle bearings on the back and a whole bunch of rings to keep everything stable.
And this is to make sure that you have absolutely no backlash because these movements are being repeated shot to shot and they have to match, yeah?
As little backlash as is possible. Yeah.
With a large axial load.
Right.
Well, and the space constraints of what you can get inside of it. That's the other thing.
That's the most challenging part. You get these beautiful drawings, but then you have to put a real thing inside.
Gotcha. Did you build the bulk of the ship before you had to do machining inside, or are you guys working in concert with each other?
Kind of in concert, but mostly the ship kind of got built and the armature came later in the process. So, they're all different. Every build's different.
Right.
So,
this one is particularly filthy, and I'm curious about the dirt.
Well, that's a story point. So.
Oh, we can't talk about that.
I don't know if we can or we can't.
Let's
can we
talk about your application of
we can
mud.
talk about it.
Okay.
We can talk about it. So it's a story point.
Yeah,
so it's buried. It's been buried they keep saying it's been buried for 100 years. And these kids find it. They find the door, and it's upside down. And they access the door and get inside of it and somehow activate the autopilot. And this thing comes out of the ground. It's upside down, comes out of the ground.
And turns over.
And goes off into space on autopilot. So, we had to have dirt on it. And that was a question of how much dirt do we have and what is the dirt made out of? And it needs to be reversible. So,
right.
So I went with drywall mud and temper paint just because everything's water-based and it'll break back down, so it'll come back off. So it's worked really, really well.
So just like a wet sponge brings it back off and...
Yeah.
I hope you're shooting in order?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
And that's a blessing. And that was what we talked about earlier was on one of the Star Trek films, the Enterprise winds up in a battle. It got hit 11 times. We had a map that was on the wall that had all the hits numbered so you knew which sequence they were. And then there was a Polaroid that went with 3 and 4 so that you knew what they looked like.
Yeah.
Because we might shoot it today and we'd have 5 hits today, but tomorrow it'll have 9, but after lunch it'll only have 2. So we're constantly, because we didn't shoot it in order,
Yeah.
we're constantly having to take them on and put them back on and take them off. And it was a real pain in the neck. And for something like this, thankfully we can shoot it in order, which makes this much, much easier to deal with. So we put the most mud on it at the beginning, and we've just been gradually removing it. Because each time the ship takes off into hyperspace, it leaves a trail of dirt and debris and stuff flying off the back of it.
Great.
Yeah.
Like the hairpins from the witch in Bugs Bunny.
Exactly.
Pew!
Yeah.
Oh, that is awesome.
So
I have to ask, just as a fellow modeler, are there any universal greeblies on this?
why do you ask? Sadly, yes, and I banned that part. I don't remember what movie that was, but I banned everybody from using it. But yes, there are
Oh, you did do
2 here and 1 here, and those are the only ones on the ship.
There's only 3 on the whole ship.
On the whole ship.
That's
and I just did that because I had to have them somewhere.
So what was the length of collaboration to reach the finished product?
What have we, probably been 7
months.
7 months? Yeah.
You get drawings from Doug, you start working out the structure, you start playing around with, I'm sure you're talking about structure before you even start building.
Yeah, it's kind of, it kind of goes hand in glove, and it depends on our schedules and when we can actually get together.
Because you're doing other things as well.
Yeah, and there's a bit of a geographic distance between our shops. So it's kind of like we have shops that are separated by about a 35, 40 mile corridor.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of, we're winging it.
You can give it to the run. Oh, there's no runners.
You were looking at the runners.
And I see I see you've got engine lights and everything.
Yeah, it's got they're programmable addressable LEDs in the engines, and John has a software program that creates sort of an oscillation animation in there. And he did that on the Razor Crest as well. I think it's been on all of them.
Yeah.
So it adds a certain amount of life to it. And they want to have sort of a little bit of a sputtering quality to these because they've been buried for 100 years.
Right, they're filled with dirt.
Yeah, and it really looks dynamic when you see it go by and these things are pulsating and whatnot. It's really cool.
Dude, I love the burnt metal paint. That's gorgeous.
That's been something fun to do. I got some stuff at Michael's that was an alcohol-based pearlescent paint.
Yeah.
And I got 6 different colors and just started playing with it. And Dan pointed out when I got these done, he's like, you did it backwards. The blue should be at the end. I'm like, you don't know anything about space metal, do you? So I was
It's a particular alloy.
It's right. You only find this stuff on Dantooine. That's the only place you can get it. It colors out differently when you heat it.
This is where the education comes in.
I did a 2-week build of Mando's Ambin rifle, and I got the metal burn paint job backwards.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even pay attention. I was like, this looks neat.
Did you have a maximum pound limit? This is John's rig, yeah?
This is John's rig.
You had a maximum pound limit?
It came out at what it came out as, and we were kind of like the rig could handle it. We did try a bottom mount the other day, and the weight is asymmetric because we're kind of coming out right about here.
Okay.
And most of the weight's back here, and we put it on the rig, it overwhelmed the belts, and they skipped.
Ooh.
So John has made a dogleg rod we're going to put in to hopefully offset the weight to move it back towards the back, but it can handle it. It just can't handle the offset weight.
So I'm looking at this rig. This can do a full up and down and also rolling this way. It's a huge amount of control.
Yeah, that's all. John made all of this in his garage.
3 garages.
Yeah, exactly. John's built the camera system, the camera track, all of it,
I'm making assumptions, but I'm curious what's the most difficult part of making this?
That's a good question. This one was really straightforward. Probably the most difficult part was the drives back and forth to John's house. Late.
Now I'm watching it jiggle. You're actually, for every frame, you're having to let it settle from the movement, yeah?
Yeah, and it works great.
Wow.
So. Yeah.
I don't think people realize just how repeatable these things actually have to be.
It's vital, or it doesn't work. Yeah, or you don't have much control if it's not.
Oh, dude, that looks so freaking cool. And did I notice there's a lit cockpit?
It does have a cockpit with an interior, yeah. John was working on the live action, and I wrote him, I said, hey, can you send me a couple of pictures of the interior? And so he took a couple of shots and sent them to me, and it's based on that. It kind of looks like it. It's enough of a suggestion.
Like it.
Yeah.
And no glass in there, right?
No glass.
Yeah, okay.
Don't want those reflections.
Guys, it is... can I come play next time you're working on one? I'll come just to give you a couple days of free labor.
If we can find the space in the garage. You know?
My shop's even smaller than your 2-car garage, I
Oh
believe.
God, mine has reached the point where it's like it's closing in around me.
Oh, look at that cockpit. That is so... I feel like I see a whole interior, man.
Well, there's a photograph. I took one of John's photographs and I kind of photoshopped out the people and there's a photograph in the back and then the little consoles. And the consoles, they did the same thing on Moff Gideon's ship, was taking solid acrylic,
Yeah.
taking a Dremel tool and just kind of carving out these consoles with elevated areas, and then a recess in it for an LED to plug into it, then paint it silver, then scratch it off, paint it silver, paint it black,
Amazing.
then Sharpie.
Like the Tyrell building from Blade Runner. Same.
Well, it's just enough to create that suggestion. You don't know what you're looking at, but it looks interesting. So
Yeah.
I always think of cockpits as like this little jewel box,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Guys, it's gorgeous. Are there any other movers like the guns and the
There
radar?
are 5 turrets have got motors, but we haven't used them.
Oh,
So
okay.
they're on
They're all
servos.
servos.
That's...
Yeah.
I really, for a long time, I never thought I'd see one of these again. A ship sitting on a motion control rig.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you go back to that, there's that thing they have on YouTube that ILM did about the Razor Crest, and it starts with me going, yeah, I got this phone call, these people want to make a model. I'm like, that's great, let me know if it ever happens, because it never happens. And then it did happen, you know? So it's kind of amazing. This is our 4th model in this set of Star Wars shows, where we're actually building a physical model and shooting motion control again. So it's definitely a throwback to the 80s, early 90s. But really thankful we're getting the chance to do this. It's really cool.
Absolutely.
Do you get a shot list to work out detail on the surface?
No.
No.
Nope.
So you just go for the highest level.
Try and get it
Yeah.
covered universally, you know, with a certain amount, and then, you know, and then to camera if we need it. And so far we've only mostly been playing with the dirt. Minor touch-ups. Remounts are kind of, they're not traumatic, but they're kind of painful because you have to disassemble the entire thing down to the armature.
In order to get to...
Yeah, to get to everything, reroute the wiring, put the rod in, then reassemble it, get it on the mover, and do final assembly here.
So does it come apart like a clamshell, like top and bottom?
Top comes off, bottom separates, the wings, these stay attached. They're removable. That all stays attached to the armature instead of the front engines.
Oh, nice.
So, and then there's several pieces that come off. I mean, things like, you know,
Oh,
it's
all
just
right.
double stick tape.
And are you like, I remember motion control shoots dressing tons of stuff to camera.
It hasn't been that much of it. You know, Moff Gideon's ship was just white.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I just airbrushed to camera, painted
Right.
those areas. And there was
Just
one
to
of the-
pull out details and see.
Yeah,
them.
just to kind of spruce it up. And I also, that thing taxed me to the limit.
Did I remember hearing that you were actually adding Greeblies to camera for one of those super close-up flybys?
Well, that's the thing that's interesting is when you build them and you look at it and to eye, everything looks great.
Yeah.
And then you put the camera on it and the camera sees such different stuff. And
It's so true.
it's amazing how much different it can look. And with Moff Gideon's ship, we had some 3D prints, which were really nice, very high resolution prints that to eye looked fine. And then we did the shot where it goes over camera, like, you know, the mimics the episode 4 shot. And there are all these terraces. You can see the build lines. So I was back there with 1500 grit sandpaper, taking that down, you know, and that's all it took was some 1500 to take it down enough that it killed it. But to eye, you basically couldn't even see it. But on camera, it was very visible. Then there were other details on the bottom during that same shot. Some parts went overhead and they were kind of deformed and rippled. And it's like, God, what is that? And they look huge. In reality, the part's like maybe 200 thousandths long and about 120 thousandths wide and about 10 thousandths thick. And the weld-on solvent had distorted it.
Of course.
But on camera, it's just this thing goes over. You know,
And your eyes like, what is that?
yeah, what's that giant thing? It's like this little tiny detail, you know, so I had to replace those with some new ones. But yeah, it's fascinating what the camera sees versus what you see by eye. But that's the magic of all this stuff. It's kind of interesting because you build these things and you got it on a table or whatever, and you bring it in here. And I was saying this yesterday, that this place is like a laboratory. And there's this thing that occurs where the camera's out here in the dark with the model and nobody can interact with it. And there's this magical process that transforms it from this plastic model into this big thing that goes thundering by on screen with the engines pulsating and everything. And it's amazing to see it transform like that. So it is definitely a magical thing to watch these things become the stuff that's on the show.
Yeah.
Kim and I are laying on the couch, we're watching season 1 of Mandalorian, and the Razor Crest flies by in space. And I said, that's so weird. That came from the garage.
I noticed recently I was painting a model and I was looking at my paint job and I was like, God, I think this looks like crap. I think I've kind of lost my mojo. And then I pulled up my camera and I'm like, oh, no. It turns out all I can do is a 2-camera paint job. So it looks not great in person, but amazing on camera.
It looks better the further back you get, and it looks better the darker it is.
Yeah. I'm curious if, you know, the 4K revolution has caused you to have to add more detail than you used to.
Well, that was interesting because we saw that in Phantom Menace where we started shooting the digital, and it was really interesting because before you could put a piece of black tape on something and get away with it, because it used to be the rule of thumb was for film, unfocus your eye, and for TV, close your eye. You know? And and now it's all different, and it's kind of scary because that was where we started seeing it on Phantom Menace. You put a piece of black tape back there, it's obviously a piece of black tape.
Yeah.
And that goes further into the high frame rate stuff. And there again, there's something that's going on where things look more artificial.
Yeah,
because the higher frame rate. Yeah, it's really
I
interesting.
don't love the high frame rate.
I don't either.
I want 24 and only 24.
Yeah, it's funny because I saw something, there was a study done where it was a scientific study. They said when you exceed 40 movements per second, your brain interprets it as reality.
Yeah.
When you're below 40, there's more of a cinematic experience and it's different. So that's a whole other level of detail that goes into these things. So, and that's makeup and everything, you know, it really shows things in a very different light.
So after this is built, do you guys have this scanned before you paint it? Do you have it scanned afterwards?
It gets scanned afterwards typically.
Okay.
So, yeah. And then, because they start us off, they give us a rendering of a digital model that they produced, and then we get that. And one of the things that's hard is they've got a lot of model kit parts that are digital.
Yeah.
And they'll take them and they'll scale them and they'll warp them and do all these things. So you might see the same part 6-8 times and it's different configurations, scales, all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm not making that thing over and over and over again. So we'll come close.
Sure.
And then there's sort of this, after we do this, then there's sort of this bridging of the digital and the practical model together. So they kind of resemble each other.
I remember seeing the Star Destroyer shot from Rogue One and texting John Nolan being like, is that I'm noticing Tamiya model parts on that. And he was like, I digitized them all.
Yeah. That's where a lot of that stuff comes from. There's a database of all that stuff. And there are all those parts that are like from the rail guns and things like that are kind of universal.
Those
that are just so perfect. Yeah.
Multi-scales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Guys, it's so gorgeous.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks for taking me on a tour of the, I'd love to get a ride, but barring that, this is the next best thing.
It's really cool. I love the paint job. I think it looks so good.
It's gorgeous.